Dear compatriots and friends, I am pleased and honored to be invited to make this opening statement. On behalf of the International League of People's Struggle, I wish to convey warmest greetings of solidarity to the distinguished guests and all participants in the International Conference for People's Rights in the Philippines. I congratulate the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, Initiatives for Peace in Mindanao, Karapatan, and Ecumenical Voice for Human Rights and Peace for successfully organizing this conference. I am proud of the fact that this conference has been organized with the cooperation of the International League of People's Struggle, together with Bayan. Now gathered are the delegates from human rights organizations and social movements in different parts of the world. We have built on the momentum gained from the 2013 International Conference for Human Rights and Peace in the Philippines, when you constituted the ICHRP as a full coalition from the International Coordinating Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines. We in the IRP has happily observed that ICPRP is fulfilling its aim to raise the global discourse on people's rights and strengthen efforts at forging international solidarity for the struggles of Filipinos and the world's peoples. You have adhered to your constitution and have carried out well your program to uphold the people's rights in the economic, social, cultural, civil, and political fields. You have asserted, defended, and advanced these rights against the scourge of imperialist plunder and war. You have given splendid support to the Filipino people's struggle for national and democratic rights. We highly appreciate your campaign that culminated in the International People's Tribunal, IPT 2015, on crimes against the Filipino people by the Philippine and U.S. presidents, convened in Washington, D.C. from July 16 to 18 last year. Your current conference celebrates the 40th anniversary of the Universal Declaration for the Rights of Peoples, which was issued by non-governmental organizations convened in Algiers on July 4, 1976. This Algiers Declaration emphasizes the rights of peoples in their collectivity rather than individual rights, as in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and rather than the states as the outcrop of people's sovereignty and caretaker of the people, as in the Charter on the Economic and Social Rights and Duties of States, in the quest for a new international political and economic order. The Algiers Declaration sets forth the following rights of peoples. 1. Right to existence. 2. Right to political self-determination. 3. Economic rights. 4. Right to culture. 5. Right to environment and common resources. And 6. Rights of minorities. It clarifies an inseparable link between individual and collective rights, defines the interrelations between economic, political, cultural, and social rights, and asserts the right of the oppressed peoples of the world to fight for their liberation. It points out that individual rights cannot be realized unless collective rights are respected, that the economic, political, and cultural injustices experienced by people are interrelated, and that all peoples of the world have the legitimate right to fight for their national and social liberation if they are under foreign or local oppression. It reflects the recognition of collective rights of peoples and the UN Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights and the UN Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, earlier issued in 1976. The UN Declaration on the Right to Development, adopted in 1986, recognizes the collective rights of peoples and countries to development. The Algiers Declaration was formulated in the spirit of upholding, defending, and promoting the rights of peoples against colonialism, imperialism, and neocolonialism, as well as against the repressive local regimes that proliferated due to the Cold War. As the colonial systems were breaking down, the Declaration paid attention to the rise of neo-colonialism as the way for the imperialist powers to perpetuate the system of exploiting and oppressing entire nations and peoples. The rights of peoples defined in the Algiers Declaration remain valid today, precisely because they are under attack by the anti-people forces of imperialism and reaction. Under the inspiration and guidance of this declaration, the peoples of the world must fight the neoliberal policy of unbridled greed and imperialist globalization and the spread of state terrorism and wars of aggression. Wars of aggression are unleashed under the US-led global war on terror and other pretexts such as the so-called responsibility to protect and humanitarian intervention. These are invoked to justify wars of intervention aimed at regime change to negate the national sovereignty of countries and the right of peoples to self-determination. US imperialism is most culpable for the massacre of millions of people, the floods of refugees, the massive destruction of social infrastructure, and the rise of fundamentalist groups. The neoliberal economic policy has brought about recurrent and worsening crisis of the world capitalist system. This has generated civil strife and state terrorism in many countries. It has also intensified the contradictions of imperialist powers. Thus, wars within countries and in global regions have arisen. The danger of a Cold War, including the threat of nuclear war, as well as environmental catastrophe due to extreme capitalist plunder, threaten the very existence of humankind. The US heads the imperialist powers in escalating the oppression and exploitation of the people and aggravating the crisis of the world capitalist system. The crisis has sharpened the contradictions between the traditional imperialist powers and newly emergent capitalist powers. The desperate attempts of the US to stave off the rise of a multipolar world and retain hegemony over a unipolar world have only served to aggravate the crisis and spread the scourge of war. Such attempts include the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, military buildup and reinforcements in strategic locations in the regions, the strategic pivot to East Asia, meddling in ASEAN affairs, and the persistence of the war on terror bogey. The broad masses of the people of the world are undergoing intolerable suffering and are increasingly driven to wage various forms of resistance. The oppressed peoples and nations are asserting their right to self-determination. We must join, support, and encourage the upsurge of anti-imperialist and democratic movements in the underdeveloped as well as in the developed countries. All these countries are now crisis-stricken, and the people are waging resistance and aspiring for a fundamentally new, better, and brighter world of greater freedom, democracy, social justice, all-round development, and international solidarity. It is fine that delegates to this conference went on solidarity missions to various regions in the Philippines to witness the dire social conditions and the gross and systematic violations of human rights. You went to specific areas in Mindanao, Cagayan Valley, Eastern Visayas, Panay, and Southern Tagalog. I hope that you have enhanced your grasp of the realities and issues by having attended the seminar on people's rights, right to development and right to self-determination by even international, and the second General Assembly of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. The current International Conference for People's Rights in the Philippines will enable you to further deepen your understanding of the human rights situation in the country, heighten your sense of solidarity with the Filipino people, and strengthen your determination to support them. You will have a chance to join the People's Mobilization in Manila on July 25 during President Duterte's State of the Nation address to the 17th Congress. Let us look forward to the people's renewing the demand for change and for a just and lasting peace, as well as the new President's presentation of the situation and his plans for solving problems related to the concern for people's rights. Let me describe to you briefly the rights and aspirations of the Filipino people in relation to the 6 rights of peoples defined by the Algiers Declaration. Number 1, right to existence. The Filipino people have the inviolable right to exist with their own sovereignty, territory, economy, social cohesion, and culture. They have a long prehistorical and historical background of coherence and development. They have emerged as a single nation in a modern nation state by upholding the right to independence and by waging revolutionary struggles against Spanish colonialism, US imperialism, and Japanese fascist occupation. Number 2, right to political self-determination. The Filipino people have the right to political self-determination. They have the right to national sovereignty and independence to decide what political system to build and are equal to any other nation in the international community. They have the right to abrogate any treaty or agreement that offends them and puts them in an unequal position. Number 3, economic rights of peoples. The Filipino people have economic rights to be free from exploitation by foreign monopoly capitalism and by such local exploiting classes as the big compradors and landlords. They have the right to develop their economy through national industrialization and land reform. They have the right to a means of livelihood and to a just income on the basis of work and professional and technical skills. They have the right to ever-expanding and ever-improving social services. Number 4, right to culture. The Filipino people have the right to a national, scientific, and pro-people system of culture and education. They have the right to cherish and promote the national and local cultures. They have the right to use science and technology to develop their country. They have the right to a cultural and educational system that serves the toiling masses of workers and peasants and the middle social strata. Their children and youth have the right to enjoy ever-expanding and improving free public education at all levels. Number 5, right to environment and common resources. The Filipino people have the right to their environment and the natural resources within their sovereign territory and within the exclusive economic zone and extended continental shelf as defined by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. They have the right to a clean and healthy environment, to conserve the natural resources and prevent plunder by the imperialists and the local exploiters, and to use said resources for economic and social development. Number 6, rights of minorities. The national minorities have the right to self-determination and to struggle against any national discrimination, oppression and exploitation by the state or any instrumentality of vested political and economic interests of the majority population. They have the right to decide what serves them politically, economically, socially and culturally. They cannot be imposed upon. They have the right to decide the use of the natural resources in their areas. They have the right to full information before they give consent to the external use of said resources and a just share of income from such use. As the delegates of the conference had observed, all the rights of peoples defined by the Algiers Declaration are violated by the imperialist powers, the monopoly firms, the big compradors, landlords and corrupt bureaucrats in the existing semi-colonial and semi-feudal ruling system in the Philippines. The people are suffering from the rigors of intensified exploitation under the neoliberal policy regime and the reign of state terrorism under Oplan Bayanihan. The Aquino regime played up the supposed growth of the gross national domestic product, but in fact this is bloated by debt-driven and import-dependent consumption. It has not developed a productive system, but has wasted huge amounts of public debt and the foreign exchange remittances of overseas contract workers. The plunder of human and natural resources has generated super profits for the foreign corporations and their local collaborators, but it has resulted in aggravating and deepening the underdevelopment of the economy, the increase of unemployment, and the spread of poverty and misery. The lack of full national independence and the treasonous character of the reactionary state and the local exploiting classes have given rise to escalating conditions of exploitation and oppression. The Philippines is bound by unequal treaties and agreements in favor of the U.S. and its partners to the detriment of the people. Several grossly unequal economic and trade agreements shackle the Philippines. The U.S. controls the Philippines militarily under a one-sided defense pact, under a military assistance agreement, the Visiting Forces Agreement, and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which has flagrantly brought back the U.S. military bases under the pretext of the U.S. defending the country from China. Outlined by Anian is a brazen military campaign plan of state terrorism, instigated and assisted by U.S. imperialism and carried out by the Aquino puppet regime. You have observed the militarization of entire regions, covering both rural and urban areas and targeting people's organizations, non-government organizations, cooperatives, and alternative schools. You can see in the plight of the Luman, or indigenous peoples of Mindanao, the violation of the right of the minorities. Their ancestral lands are being grabbed for exploitation by big corporate mines and agricultural transnational corporations. A big number of people in Luman communities have been displaced, and their schools have been occupied or destroyed by state military and paramilitary forces. Their leaders and members have been targeted for harassment, abductions, trumped-up charges, and extrajudicial killings by the military, as well as paramilitary groups directed by the military. The mining, logging, and monoculture plantations also victimized them, as well as the peasants in lower areas, because of the poisoning of the streams and erosion of the soil. Their ecologically destructive operations ruin the health and livelihood of the people and their communities and contribute to the global warming. We in the ILPS expect the delegates and their organizations or institutions to speak and act on the violations of people's rights that they have observed in the Philippines. The framework of upholding people's rights and international solidarity is clear. You must assess, express, and reassert international opinion against the transgressions of the previous Aquino regime and reaffirm the verdict of the International People's Tribunal 2015. Further, you can encourage the Filipino people to struggle for their rights and urge the Duterte government to heed the people's demand for change in accordance with the people's rights. You must draw up a plan for a continuing international solidarity campaign for peace, human rights, and people's rights in the Philippines. You must appeal to the international community to support the Filipino people's assertion of their rights as defined by the Algiers Declaration and guaranteed by related human rights conventions and instruments. You must link up with and contribute to global campaigns of solidarity with people struggling against imperialism and for national and social liberation to culminate in the next international conference in 2019. Fight for people's rights. Long live the Filipino people. Long live international solidarity.